questions. You don't have to stop it.
I just remember last night, I remember you talking about the figure that 780,000 people die from prescribed drugs in America alone every year. Is that like the recreational use as well? Abusive? I mean, like, are they just like
the technical term for it is called iatrogenic illness. IAT.
Is it misprescribed, misdiagnosed?
I mean, in a certain, you know, you have to make a distinction between medicine as like the actual pill itself versus the medical system in terms of like hospital administration. And I mean, there's a substantial amount of error that happens in the day-to-day running of a hospital because it's such a huge process. So there's literally a lot of like misadministered drug. This person gets the wrong pill. This person gets that. So that's an enormous factor in it, certainly. But yeah, that's a long documented process, and it's hard. You know, you have to make distinctions between is it the medicine itself and side effect from that caused the damage, or was it actually the misapplication of the tool? Yes. And in many cases, in inpatient situations in hospitals, people just get the wrong pills, and that happens a lot.
It's like a pretty crazy number, though.
Or too many pills, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for some physical ailment. It could be for a mental illness, where I mean, my aunt died from taking too many pills, not overdosing, but just taking too many pills over a 15-year period.
Like my mother's friend, she's had this major medical problem for many years, and they just keep trying. Like they really say, "We'll try this." Steroids and different types of drugs, and often the reaction that is
right. That was sort of the situation.
It's just kind of like it's an attempt at trying to fix the problem, but it's.
Yeah, my aunt died when I was about 10, and I guess when she died or around that time, I was asking my mom a lot about it, and she would try to explain it to me. Like, okay, she's on. Every time we would go home, it was something she had to deal with. Okay, you know, your aunt is on these 6 different kinds of drugs, but then she had an adverse reaction to that one, so the doctor changed it. Then because it didn't mix with that one, he had to change these 3 more. Now that she's taking these 3 more, she's really getting sick from those, and then just after 10 years of that, it killed her. So, yeah, I'm not sure, you know, exactly what goes into that 780,000 deaths. But the point is it's in the conventional medicine field. It's not from naturopathy or homeopathy or
just drug abuse.
Where they use the needles, acupuncture, or massage, or
it doesn't include like drug abuse, like
no, I doubt it would. I mean, if somebody gets pills off the black market and they overdose on it, I doubt it would. But it could. I mean, so what,
like opiates. I mean, they're.
Yeah, but I mean, you can be prescribed an opiate and then get addicted to it and then down the whole bottle and die.
Yeah.
I mean, is that part of the 780,000? I don't know. I hope we have more questions.
Where in Taiwan can I get more natural omega-3? I know that the fish is mostly farmed, and the...
What do you mean not in a pill?
Yeah, not in a pill, and the chickens are grain-fed. So if I want to eat natural omega-3 in Taiwan, how can I do that? Do you know? Have you done any research into that?
Well, you can eat as many green leafy vegetables. I mean, here I've got green leafy vegetables, flax, hemp, walnuts, and hazelnuts. If you can get
nuts.
Oh, no nuts. Okay, green leafy vegetables, and I'm sure you can go to the natural stores, the organic stores, and they probably have eggs where the chickens are eating the pastured eggs. Hopefully, you could test it. You could buy a pack of 6, and you open up and you look at them, and if the yolk is really dark orange color, that means that they've either been giving the animal a lot of vitamins or it's been eating really healthy food.
But if it's faded yellow, then it's not so great.
Sorry? If it's the faded yellow, that means they're grain fed.
Okay.
School bus color is the wrong color. It should be orange.
Yeah, dark orange, like that tea.
Yeah.
Kind of dark. Natural sources. You have something to say about that?
Yeah, sesame seeds are very cheap.
She doesn't eat
I can't eat
seeds.
seeds or nuts. I'm allergic.
Oh, even if you really any kind of seeds, even if
Yeah, I can have a few. I just get a really bad rash.
How about if you sprout them? Because you can actually if you sprout.
Bean sprouts I'm okay with and stuff.
Yeah, because if you sprout them, actually you have 9 times more omega-3 than
So
you usually
bean
have.
sprouts are okay? And
Uh,
alfalfa
no-
sprouts?
I'm not sure about alfalfa.
Should be
but
dark,
you can-
dark green vegetables. The darker, the better.
Yeah, any of the sesame type of seeds are very rich with omega-3s. So if you just put them in a sprouter, spray them with a little bit of water every day, they sprout in a week, and you can eat that in a salad. It's full loaded, like
Oh.
more than fish oil. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to go the fish direction, you can buy canned sardines and mackerel. And I don't think those are farm raised.
I think you don't put it in.
Well, probably. If you can try to find some fish that are not farm raised, and I think sardines are one of the best
Okay.
as far as that go. Little teeny fish, right?
I can eat sardines.
And mackerel, I know they sell mackerel in tins, but I don't know. Do you know anything about how actually healthy those fish are?
I'm not sure about mackerel, but they do have organic raised fish, raised in the eastern part of Taiwan. So you have salmon organic, you have some other stuff. Not big choice,
It's
but
hard to get every day.
Where do you get
yeah,
that?
it's hard to get that every day.
Where do you get it?
Most organic stores.
At the
yeah.
organic
Yeah.
stores.
I kind of wonder about some of the, these things though, because
Mhm.
to the extent of the regulation, right? You
Yeah.
go into the store and they're like natural chicken, and the labeling, they have, it's very ambiguous in terms of how they define these things, right? So you're like natural chicken. It's like, well, what is that? What does that mean? Natural? It doesn't mean anything. Of course, they have people selling it have an interest to frame it in that way. But it's like, how well regulated is this stuff? So do you really know? Because like you're making a comment about eggs, and that's a real challenge, right? Because I mean, free range, for example, with chicken, free range can mean that they have a slightly larger pen, or that they have a small amount of time each day where
They
they're
go
out
out
of their
for an
pen.
hour or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, and that goes. So it can be very kind of confusing to know what exactly you're getting, and you can't necessarily trust the regulation because who is there to manage this, and it's just not generally a very high priority for government. These government agencies that regulate this kind of thing are interested in public health. They're interested in preventing, mass salmonella outbreaks and things. They're not interested in like, am I getting as much omega-3 for my buck as I'd like to be.
Luckily, we live here in Taiwan. It's not a very big place. I've said it before. I really want to actually go visit the farms where some of this stuff is raised, and I think that's actually the best thing you can do, or possibly look online, see if anyone has done some research into the different farms. It might be all in Chinese, but if the farm is here in Taiwan, it should be possible to actually go to the farm and meet the farmer and see what their practices
Yeah, actually,
are.
it's possible. Yeah, actually, you can do that. Like you can schedule some visits to some of the organic farms. Yeah.
Have you done that before in the
I haven't
past?
done it, but the organic store where I'm usually buying, they do organize those trips.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of produce or what?
Most free-range chickens and some plants.
Really? So they do, but they
Yeah.
use it for chickens as well, because that
Yeah.
plants, I think I would be a little more like it's a little simpler. Some of the animal
Right,
production
right.
stuff. It's like,
As for the I think you can also contact some of the farmers who raise the chickens and
Okay.
just go personally visit.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, if you want to trust the food that you eat, do you trust the person who sells you the food? If you don't trust the person who sells you food, then you have to go to the person who actually grows the food. And if you can't trust the person who grows your food,
Grow your own.
you gotta grow your own. Exactly. And if you got a problem with yourself,
The thing is,
you're really in trouble.
in this day and age, I feel personally that staying on top of what I'm eating is like, it's just overwhelming.
It's
And
so
I, rather than spend the time to do the research, I follow a very, very basic guideline for, like, don't eat too much fried food, try to eat some vegetables and fruit, but I mean, it's a very loosely based health guide. If someone would put together a website on how to eat healthy in Taiwan, that would be brilliant. I would follow it.
I'm sure there are already. They're in
But
Chinese.
someone that I knew and trusted, that would be better. And I wouldn't have to second guess it.
Trusting me, that's a leap of faith, man.
You know, your point is a valid one too, and then it's, you know, the concept of health implies balance of some kind,
Yeah.
and it, you know, you can go to an extreme with this stuff where you just start getting overwhelmed with all kinds of details, and then it just becomes obsessive, and that's fundamentally unhealthy as well. Yeah.
If you start eating as enjoyable of it, if your focus is always first and foremost health, then you preempt the enjoyment of eating the food. I mean, you still eat the foods you like, but you'll stop yourself from maybe having, like, just going on a whim, like just following your crave, which is part of the.
It doesn't have to be necessarily like I did this week. I was craving chicken wings. You know, because it's like hard to find a restaurant that makes good chicken wings in Taiwan. They do exist, but so what I did is I bought chicken, and instead of just and then I bought blue cheese to make blue cheese dip, because that's really what I care about. Not even the chicken. I could just want to drink that. But I also made sure to buy myself, you know, a big fat carrot to go along with it. I had half carrots and half chicken on my plate, right? So I think that's the most important thing, is to make sure that we're, you know, getting the things that we need, like raw vegetables. I said that there was another speech, the raw versus cooked food thing, and it is almost another speech, but I think it's important to say it's whenever you cook something, it starts to lose some of its nutrients. Some of those nutrients start to get destroyed over a certain temperature. You can buy milk, but you can also find milk that has only been pasteurized to 67 degrees Celsius or something like that.
Yeah, there's 65.
65
Yeah.
degrees. And that retains a lot more of the original nutrients that was in the milk. So my point is, how many Taiwanese people do you know, how many Taiwanese restaurants do you know that serve salad with fresh vegetables? It's pretty rare. So like, when I go to buy noodles, I always get a plate of vegetables, but I have to also understand those vegetables are cooked. They're not as good as raw vegetables. So I try to supplement that with raw fruits and vegetables.
So there are a couple ideas. In traditional Chinese medicine, the idea of raw food is very much a no-no, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's considered basically it's unprocessed, and the body has to exert extra energy in the processing of digestion of it, and it's kind of just off the plate. It's barbarian food. It's just not really in there. You know, with all these questions of nutrition too, it's very easy to kind of frame it in which is the right way, raw, cooked, whatever. And you know, there are two sides of it. Like what you're saying, when you cook food, there's a certain amount of the enzymes that are in the food which get destroyed, and those have beneficial qualities. At the same time, when you cook food, you actually a lot of the nutrition, some of the nutrition becomes much more accessible. For example, you know, cooking meats, right? There are some anthropologists in the last decade who've been putting out a lot of ideas saying that the huge explosion in Homo sapiens brain size was stimulated by cooking and our development of use of fire, right? And because of that, we were able to access a lot more nutrients in the animals that we were able to catch.
Physiological change.
Yeah, so that, because we were able to get way more nutrients in our diet, that was able to be a catalyst to create the potential for us to feed these much larger brains that we have.
That was because of the meat mostly though. Because the meat was really hard to chew and really tough, and you could only get a little bit.
Right.
But then if you
Or
cook the
grain,
meat,
is it
Right.
something like that?
well, our anthropologists basically pointed that meat being the reason our brains went.
I'll be a little bit in defense of raw food. I have a CD about raw for 30 days, where there is this very famous Gabriel Cousins, it's a famous American raw food doctor, and he basically they invited like around 10 diabetics, and just gave them raw food and measured their
glucose levels.
yeah, and everybody got off medicine in very short time.
It's really, really good for diabetes.
Yeah. And one guy had genetic diabetes, and he got like a few times his amount of insulin because he had to have it. He has a genetic problem, but it got decreased by a few times. But some of them canceled. They couldn't take it. They couldn't just eat raw food. It was too much stress for them, and they just pulled back from that.
Yeah.
So
Your body would kind of freak out when you get. But we notice the virtue of things like raw food, because in this day and age, the overwhelming amount of illnesses that we tend to have are illnesses of excess,
yeah.
right? Which is like diabetes, hypertension, cancer, high blood pressure. These are all excess diseases, and so switching to something like raw, it compensates for that, and so it is a wonderful antidote for it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that cooked foods are intrinsically bad. It's that because we've swung so far, and like what you're saying, it's just kind of a question of, it's a question of balance. And so because we have so little access to it, it makes sense to kind of go back. But if you had somebody, for example, who had was living in some society in the world where they were massively malnourished, right? They just simply did not have would the best thing to give them be a piece of broccoli or a piece of steak? In that moment, a piece of steak might be someone, but with the day and age we live in, that is a less common issue. Now we've kind of evolved beyond, basic malnutrition doesn't happen that often. Things like, you talked about, is food or medicine the thing? I mean, the biggest advantage in 20th century human health was sanitation, plumbing, like plumbing systems and public sanitation, sewers. That trumps everything else that's happened in medical science in terms of like promoting longer lifespans and reduced spread of massive communicable disease. So we've kind of moved beyond some of these things in the past, and so now, we look at things like raw food, and they're awesome, and they are useful because that's the most common problem set we're at now. We're getting too much processed stuff, too much excess. So raw food it can be very appropriate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these other things are bad. It's a question of it's the right tool at the right time.
Right. And when I said raw food versus cooked food, I didn't mean like they're fighting each other.
Yeah.
Actually, the study that I heard says if your diet is over 50%, if it's 51% cooked, it actually creates an immune response in your body. If it's over 50% raw, your body doesn't create that same immune response. So it's kind of like then it's a balance. So of course, cooked food is good. Tomatoes are healthier when they're cooked, right? Meat becomes easier to digest and easier to get the nutrients from when it's cooked, but you also need to have fruits and vegetables that are uncooked as well. As they say, at least 51% raw.
Like in North America, we come from this idea of the food groups as being a whole picture for nutrition and health.
You mean the pyramid?
Yeah, the pyramid.
The food pyramid. The food pyramid.
Something we were taught growing up. This touch on each of the food.
No, I know
pyramid.
that's funny, and in a way, the food pyramid is okay for if you're 5, 6, 7 years old, but it was created by the grain and dairy producers in the United States. Yeah, I mean the base is like grains, right? And they're like, get your 12 servings of grain a day, and they're just going like, yeah. Or whatever, it was like 9 to 12 servings, I don't remember. And then the next one up from that was dairy and meat. So it's like these are the main producers, and then above that was fruits and I don't remember what it was actually, or maybe vegetables was next. Dairy and meat, and at the very top was like fats and sugars.
And oils and sugars.
Fats and oils and sugars.
Funny, I mean, everything I know about health and nutrition is secondhand information. I don't really have a good understanding of my own health in terms of how I've been eating, and so every time I read something about it, trying to follow secondhand information is, and finding the time to actually experiment with it, over long periods of time is.
Yeah, I think one of the things that changed my life was actually I read the Michael Pollan's book In Defense of Food in 2009. I think the book was published in 2008, and just the simple thing of understanding how fiber works in our body to slow the uptake of the sugars that we eat, the carbohydrates, and as a thing, just that by itself, if you say, okay, what is my meal going to be tonight? In Taiwan, it's oftentimes is it going to be rice or noodles, or if it was in the United States, it might be potatoes or bread or something like that to go with maybe your meat, right? But it's important to have a good source of fiber so you don't use up the carbohydrates, the sugar too fast. Protein's a whole other thing. But if you say, what is the, I always hear it, let's go out to eat. Okay, what do you want, rice or noodles? Or that's what I ask my kids in school. What do you like to eat for dinner? They often say rice or noodles, right? But if you understand that these white bread or white rice or white noodles is mostly almost just entirely a carbohydrate without any fiber, without any redeeming, generally without any redeeming qualities, you have to say, if I want my body to use that carbohydrate properly, I need to give it fiber, and fiber has to come from something else besides.
I understand all that, but it's a very abstract understanding of health, because we don't actually feel the fiber. We don't actually go through the process.
You can test it on yourself. You can say, okay, today I'm only going to eat carbohydrates.
Well, some things,
and then the next day you're going to say, okay, I'm going to eat half carbohydrates with half fiber and see how your energy levels fluctuate.
This book that you just mentioned, the In Defense of Food, he gives a brilliant synopsis. The book, it begins and ends with 7 words, and it says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And then the rest of the book is explaining what that means. And he goes on to define what food is, right? And we tend to think that food in a general sense is anything that I can put in my mouth, chew, and swallow. And so he goes on to sort of look at that, and some of the things that we might be used to eating in this day and age aren't necessarily food in a sense, right? They've been processed to an extent that they would be these bizarre items. And so his point, eat food. And so he's kind of encouraging us to eat things that we would qualify as really food. Not too much, the problems that come with eating excess, and mostly plants. And he talks about the virtues of plants. But one of his points in the book is kind of like what you've just spoken to about the confusion caused by nutritional science, because we feel like we need to wait for the scientists to give us a great next great proclamation about what the next food that's going to save us all is going to be. And you know, he's a great storyteller, and he tells some history. For example, the notion that many years ago that margarine was better for us than butter, which of course was total bunk. Oops, right? And he goes and he looks at some of these mistakes that were made. For example, the notion that saturated fat and that dietary cholesterol causes blood cholesterol, which is totally bogus. And so he goes through and he tells some of the stories, and you see the political side, the political influences that spun these and made people have these things. So what he's really a proponent of in this book is he looks at traditional ways of eating that have evolved in all of the world's cultures, and said, you know, it's not that one is necessarily superior, but these people evolve knowing how to eat in common sense, balanced, healthy ways. Not even just in terms of, like, you know, immediately we think nutritional breakdown. They did things like they ate at a table with other people, and they took their time, they shared a meal. It was a lifestyle thing as opposed to out of a bag when you're going to run 5 minutes for places. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, no, these things actually make a difference on a lot of levels. And so he does a great job in this book of kind of, you know, in defense of food. He's like, you know, his point is like food can stand on its own. We don't need nutritionists to come up and break it all down and tell us what we need. If you're eating real food and aligned with a certain few principles, then...
I think that there's someone like the idea of eating as a family or something.
Yeah.
If you have someone who's cooking for it that loves you.
Yeah.
That's rather than, you know, the person that's trying to make money from you.
Yeah. When was the person...
Relationship.
Yeah, when was the last time you were ever in the kitchen and added high fructose corn syrup to anything? Right? I mean, like, it just doesn't... You don't do it, right? You know what I mean? So right there, the fact that aspect of it is going to obviate all kinds of weird processed freaky stuff that are, quote, non-food from being in your diet.
Jim, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question. I was just wondering if anybody's read anything on, like if you do eat meat, like how much are scientists recommending that you have per week, and what kinds of meat are generally the ones you should stick to? Like,
I think you don't need very much. I think when we were growing up, I think they recommended like 3 servings a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And what was a serving was probably like 4 ounces or something like that. So that's 8 to 12 ounces a day. But I think you only need like 2 ounces a day if you eat meat, if it's really high quality meat.
I don't eat a whole lot of meat, but when I do, I tend to eat chicken.
Right.
But I usually, like.
Well, I think the question is why do you? I eat meat too, but I want to ask you why do you eat the meat that you eat? Just because. Well, then don't think. Then you don't really need to think about it because you're eating it because it tastes good. If you're eating it for the protein, then you need to make sure you get enough protein, but you can also get lots of protein from the other things you eat as well. Plants have protein in them, and grains, and nuts, and beans, and things like that as well. I think one serving or less a day, 0 to 1 servings a day. Would you agree? Between 0 and 1?
Well, actually, it depends. I've seen some health experts who went like hardcore vegetarian, and then they had problems. They went hardcore vegetarian raw, and they still had problems. And they tried a few other ways, and then they went back to meat. But of course, they advocate organic meat and all that.
Right, that's why I say 0 to 1. And
Yeah.
you don't have to eat meat every day.
I went
But
from
if it makes your body healthier, like your
Yeah,
experience.
and some of them actually
Like 5
advocate, like,
And-
for example, Joseph Mercola, he says there are 3 types, according to him. There is carb type, protein type, and mixed. So I, for example, am mixed. I know I always need more things of different variety. But for the protein types, like himself, like in his resume, he has like 3 times a day meat.
Depends on your lifestyle, I guess, too, if you're a
But-
physical
Yeah.
person.
What is-
Yeah.
Did you talk about what his portion size is, though?
I can't remember. I don't think he says a lot. Yeah, I don't think he says a lot, and also he's also a big proponent of even raw meat.
Because like a quarter-pound cheeseburger, a quarter pound is 7 ounces,
Right.
and I think a serving is actually only 4 ounces. That's like a single cheeseburger. I mean, I'm not saying go the route of the cheeseburger,
Yeah.
but that's the size.
Yeah,
that's
there are a
the
lot of other
size the
things
portion.
happening in cheeseburger besides just the meat.
Right. I'm just
But,
saying that's the size. That's a portion
It really,
size.
like his point though as well, that I think it depends on lifestyle. It depends on certain individual differences. It depends on lifestyle issues as well. For me, I'm a protein type. I don't feel fed unless I've had a protein, and I'm extremely physically active, so I eat an enormous amount of protein every day. I also eat an enormous amount of fruit and vegetables. I eat almost no grains because I think grains for me cause problems, as I think they do for a lot of people actually. There are things in grains that are protective. This is sort of a controversial notion, but there's the notion there are things called, which are framed anti-nutrients in grains, which are essentially like protective things to prevent birds and so forth from wanting to eat these grains off of plants, and so they're actually anti-nutrients that cause inflammation reactions. Things very commonly known, one is gluten that's contained in a lot of grains, specifically wheat, which although there are very small number of people who are very intensely, they have celiac disease, which are just blown out by it. It's suggested that there's a huge number of the population, like the majority of the human race actually has a sensitivity to gluten, but we don't realize it as human race because it's like the foundation of our entire human food production system. So everyone eats it, so everyone is kind of victim to it, so we don't even know.
And gluten is something that's not contained in the 3 parts of a grain. There's the fiber. There's the
bran.
There's the bran, that's the fiber, there's the germ.
The
Sorry,
germ.
so the gluten is not in the germ.
The
The gluten is actually in the, mixed in with the carbohydrates.
I'm trying to remember if wheat germ actually includes gluten. I don't know if it does or not.
It's in the
But
walls.
I know that there are certain grains that have higher.
It's in the cell walls.
Cell walls.
It's
in the cell walls.
It's the glue that holds the cell walls. We don't have technology.
So I wonder if there's something in the germ of the grain that would balance or counteract the gluten.
For someone who has celiac disease now,
Right.
there are certain grains that have less. Rice has far less of it. I've actually been told that
Yeah.
white rice we think of as being negative, but that white rice for people who have sensitivities, this is actually better than brown rice because the part that's removed can cause sensitivities to some people. There are other grains that don't have this problem at all. But again, this is one of these things. You start talking and it just never ends because it spirals and it's like, well, where do you fit on this? What are your issues and what are your concerns? You might be one of these people that eat pounds on grains and you feel great, and a piece of meat makes you feel bogged down. And I'm not. I'm the opposite. And so, you know, to a certain extent, you kind of just, if you can learn to be sensitive to listen to your, follow some certain common sense things, and then listen to your body and just try to trust your body more than you do some scientists.
Yeah. I had a roommate, her name was Sarah, and she lived in Taiwan here, and she never got sick a day in her life. Never. She'd never known what being sick was. She's never had a cold, never had, an illness. She was already in her late 20s. And I found out that she grew up in British Columbia, way out in a farm. She never had a chemical in her life. Never had McDonald's. Never, when she was older, she did. When she went to university, she started eating McDonald's. But when she was raised way out in the boonies, where her mom made natural butter, and she had lots of meat, lots of vegetables. Not so much grain, but her mom made bread, and they just lived like farmers/hermits or something. And then she just ate only homemade food, organic, all her life. She never had a single chemical, not even a pudding or any desserts. It was all her mom made it. And she never has been sick. She can't get sick. She comes to Taiwan and she's still immune to everything here. She's just completely immune. She started eating unhealthy food in university, and so she eats it now, McDonald's.
We're predispositioned to our health in some ways. Maybe at a very young age, our health is defined for us.
That's right. I think by the time you're, a certain age, you can get sick. Yeah.
Okay, our time is running out. We have to. Does anyone has anything to add for last word, last sentence?
No, but I think those 7 words from Michael Milan are the best. I was trying to remember those to tell you, but I couldn't remember. What was it?
Eat food,
not too much,
mostly
mostly
plants.
plants. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. So next week, Alex will give me a speech. What's your speech on next week?
Divination, practice, and philosophical implication of the Book of Change.
And the Book of Change was written by.
Well,
By unknown author.
yeah, the Book of Change is a 3,000 years old Chinese book, and it was used for divination mostly, but there is also some philosophy inside.
Is that the I
It's
Ching?
the
Is that
basis.
the I Ching?
Yeah, the I Ching.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
Ching.
basis of the whole Chinese philosophy, actually, Taoism and Confucianism.
Are you going to go into divination?
He's gonna
Can we
tell our future.
throw some
Yeah.
comments on that?
I'm gonna bring a fortune teller with me. No.
Well, thank you guys for sitting through that. I'm sorry I had to read so much of that. I'm still